Hello and welcome to Occupied Thoughts, a podcast brought to you by the Foundation for Middle East Peace. I'm Peter Beinart, a non-resident fellow at the Foundation. Today is October 29, 2021. I am honored to be joined today by Gaby Lasky, an Israeli human rights attorney and member of the Knesset with the Meretz Party. Gaby is one of Israel's most high-profile human rights attorneys. She has extensive experience defending Palestinians in Israeli military courts and also has represented and advised Israeli human rights organizations. We're lucky that Gaby made time for us today so we can talk about what happens when the state of Israel declares Palestinians terrorists, a conversation that's urgent to have now because on October 22nd, 2021, the Israeli government declared 6 Palestinian human rights groups to be, quote, terror organizations, unquote, a designation that effectively outlaws the groups, criminalizes their work under Israeli law, and enables Israel to seize assets, arrest staff, prohibit funding, and prohibit public expressions of support and solidarity. With this terror designation, the Israeli government has escalated its longtime efforts to crush the Palestinian organizations that document Israel's ongoing violation of Palestinian human rights and seek to hold Israel accountable. Gaby, before you entered the Knesset, you were directly involved in legal work that is connected or adjacent to what is happening now with these 6 organizations. Based on that experience and expertise that you have, can you talk to us about what's happening today?
Well, actually, the situation is very strange since there are 2 different laws that apply in Israel and in the occupied territories. And the declaration by the Minister of Defense, Benjamin Gantz, applies only in Israel. It does not apply in the occupied territories. And the military government, which rules over the occupied territories in the West Bank, has not made the same declaration, meaning that in Israel, these organizations are known or subject to terror laws, and in the West Bank they are not, which makes the situation laughable, because if someone is known to be a terror organization, it should be everywhere in the area. So in the one hand, in Israel, probably the declaration was made in Israel, so all the European governments that do send money to these organizations, they pass it through banks in Israel, meaning that they are not able to do that now because of this new declaration. But actually, the people that work in these organizations, and I'm familiar with the work mostly with 3 organizations that are the legal organizations, which are Adamir, DCI Palestine, and El Haq, they can continue their work in the West Bank. Even they can come to the military courts and represent Palestinians, although in Israel, they are now declared to be terror organizations. So first we have to know that the situation is not only unclear, but it's not, it shows us that it's more a political declaration than one based really on evidence or things like that.
Gaby, can I just follow up on that before we go on? Why don't you think that they've also used that same designation in the West Bank itself?
Because they haven't. Because
but why not? Why wouldn't they?
I don't know. In the one hand, it could be a bureaucratic explanation to it, that it takes some time to do it in the West Bank. But I think that if it would be a serious declaration, then they would have to make it at the same time. And they haven't done that. And otherwise, the next explanation is the one that it's only politically based, that they only want to stop the funding, but they don't really think that the people that supposedly act in a terror organization should be detained or not allowed to go to the office or to go to the courts.
Very, very interesting. Just to continue, since the designation of these 6 groups as terrorist organizations, there's been a huge wave of support for them from Israeli human rights organizations, civil society organizations around the world, some members of the government in the US and elsewhere coming out to defend them. And at the same time, on the other side, you hear people say, well, you haven't seen the evidence against these 6 organizations, but you're defending them. So can you talk to us about how and why you're defending these organizations when presumably you haven't seen the secret evidence against them?
Well, actually, those people that are saying that we should call them terrorist organizations, they haven't seen the evidence either. So in that sense, we're in the same part. But what I can say is that I've worked closely with at least 3 of these organizations, as I said before, the legal ones, and they are very well-known organizations, not only in the West Bank, but also internationally. We know that El Haq is a very well-known organization with a lot of credibility world round. We also know that the funding governments and organizations are very have been looking very closely into the funds that they send. And not only that, several months ago, the Israeli government has sent to them some kind of evidence or things like that, telling them that they should stop the funding, and those countries didn't stop the funding. And we also know that this whole issue began with NGO Monitor. That is the same organization that in the past has tried to stop Israeli human rights organizations. And now some of the evidence is based on reports written by this organization. I'm not saying that not only because that they wrote the reports, the reports vis-a-vis are not credible, but I've seen some of the evidence that was gathered because of another organization that was not declared now as a terrorist organization, but I've seen some of it, and I believe that at least it is not strong evidence, and it does not imply that all the organizations are working with terror organizations who are in themselves terror organizations. And we can see this in the declaration sheets as well. Some of the organizations are declared to be terror organizations because contacts with terrorist organizations or terrorist acts, but the other ones, the legal ones, are just, it's written that they represent terrorists in the courts and things like that. But, also the right-wing organization Hanonu represents Israeli Jewish terrorists, and it's not, but that's the work of a lawyer or an organization that gives legal aid. And you're not, because your client committed offenses, it doesn't mean that your organization is working as a terror organization or is a terror organization in itself.
What has been your experience in the past when Israel has accused organizations of being terror organizations and then presented the evidence? What kind of evidence have they cited in the past? How strong has it tended to be?
Again, I can't tell you exactly, because it always is, the evidence is kept secret, so it is very difficult to fight this kind of declarations while your eyes are
covered,
are covered, and and you don't know what you're dealing with. But mostly in this instance, like, this is the first time that real organizations, that their core work is human rights work, and that they're known internationally as legitimate and very well-known organizations that are working for human rights, and they have a lot of projects that can be proved and that can be shown, and you see the work that they do every day. This is like the first time that these organizations are put in the front and declared as terror organizations. So this is a very different case than some of the other cases. Nobody's saying that they directly or used force or violence or committed terror offenses or things like that. I'm not saying that it's not possible that in some organizations there are people that that are connected to terrorism, and those people should be arrested and imprisoned if after trial. I'm not saying that, but it doesn't mean that the organization in itself is a terror organization. It's the same as we would say like Bar Ilan University, because Yigal Amir came out of Bar Ilan University, and he committed a heinous crime, and it doesn't mean that Bar Ilan is implicated in that, or that we should declare Bar Ilan as a terror organization. Has no, it's not legitimate, and it has no cause of connection. And I think that what they're trying to do now is that they're trying to connect between both of them. I have to say, and people have to know, one of the organizations, the Agricultural Committee, one of the workers there, or some of the workers there, did commit a terrible terrorist attack, and that killed Rina Shinar, and we should put that on the table. And he was arrested, and I think his trial still is going on, and that's a heinous crime, and he should pay for it. But implicating all the organizations, all human rights organizations, even the organization that he works with, as a terror organization, that is going too far. And we have to know that Palestinians have the right to stand against occupation. They do not have the right to vote, and we do not want them to take to arms in order to fight the occupation. So what is left for them to do is to do human rights work for the Palestinians in the occupied territories, and to write and note all the violations of human rights that are take place in the occupied territories. And again, that is the only way that Palestinians have in order to fight occupation. And now making them a terrorist organization, which just doesn't leave them any way to fight against occupation. And so this is problematic. While again, the declaration has only been made in Israel and not in the West Bank, allowing them to continue their work.
So why do you think this was done now? I've heard some people speculate that it's an attack on these organizations because they're working with the International Criminal Court. There could be charges against, among other people, Defense Minister Benny Gantz himself. Why do you think this happened now?
I really don't have a good explanation. I really cannot say. I don't. I saw the reports that were brought out from the Minister of Defense, from the press that they gave out, and I see that what they have is only evidence, a very short piece of evidence from without us telling us who that person is. But actually, there is nothing, no real evidence connecting those organizations, or most of the organizations, to any kind of terrorism. We also, so I really cannot give you a good answer on that. I don't know why it happened now.
One of the things that we tended to hear from people who are supportive of this move is they say, why don't these organizations deny any involvement with an organization that Israel deems terrorist? It's like saying, are you now or have you ever been affiliated with a terrorist organization? It's my understanding that today under Israeli law, every Palestinian political organization, including Fatah, Mahmoud Abbas's party, is illegal. And every Palestinian, once accused, is preemptively a terrorist. So how can a Palestinian defend themselves? Is there any possibility of a Palestinian or a Palestinian NGO kind of clearing their name from a charge like this?
Well, it is very difficult, since all Palestinian organizations are affiliated to a political party. But again, those political parties are in the terrorist organization list. So even political affiliation, which is the case with these organizations, that they're affiliated, all of them are affiliated with the Democratic Front of Palestine. They are, that will be enough in that sense to say that they are terrorist organizations. But we have to say that this affiliation didn't start yesterday or a month ago or when the declaration was signed. It has been since the beginning of their work. So what happened that 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, this affiliation didn't change the situation, and today it's enough to change it to be members of to make them terror organizations. So I don't know. I can't tell you what happened. I know that there has been since the terror attack, where, as I said, where Rena Shena Zal was killed, there has been a lot of awakening. As the beginning, I know that NGO monitors started to look for different connections between the organizations and terror attacks. And since then, they have been trying to get evidence. From what I did see, because I worked in the military court for a long time, they gathered some kind of evidence for another case regarding another organization, but it is not hard evidence. You know, it's all speculation, and it's mostly not. It has really nothing to. It's all hearsay regarding the organizations that were declared today. It's not nothing. It's not that if they have like evidence or bank accounts showing that the money came that was brought, you know, from a European country was sent to a terrorist organization or things like that. It does show that prisoners that were released, some of them worked in those organizations, but that is not illegal. So I think that they really don't have hard evidence connecting those organizations. As I said, again, mostly the three organizations that are doing the legal work.
I'm curious, because how does the Israeli government define terrorism?
The law on terror defines it in a very wide way, and there are a lot of things that can make you fall into those categories. Just being a member, a passive member of one of those organizations, or even people that, for example, in the universities, go, you know, they become members of the political party, and they are elected in the students' union or something like that. They can also be charged with articles regarding membership or helping a terrorist organization.
Even if there's no evidence that they themselves have been connected to acts of violence.
Yeah, you don't need that. You don't need the connection between acts of violence, enough that you're a member or that you helped it in any way. As I said, even in the students' union, if you're a member of one of those declared organizations, and you're doing work for students or cultural work and things like that, you can be charged with terrorist act.
I'm wondering about the implications of the law for Israelis. I think according to the counterterrorism law, those who express sympathy or support for terrorist organizations are liable to be prosecuted and jailed. And so some Israeli human rights defenders are now being accused, and you yourself, I think, were accused by an Israeli organization of violating that counterterrorism law. How does this impact Israelis who may be sympathetic to these Palestinian organizations? And are you concerned at all that you yourself could be prosecuted?
No, I'm not concerned. I understood that this organization presented a complaint to the police, and none of us have been called for interrogation or questioning or things like that. But mostly we have to say that it is very problematic, because these organizations still, even according to the anti-terror law, have the right to appeal the decision regarding the declaration. So that would mean that people trying to help them regarding evidence or regarding the law or things like that, that in some way can be said that it's sympathizing. But saying that this declaration shouldn't have been made and it stands on no real grounds or things like that, that is something that it's still allowed to say. And I hope that nobody applies or believes that they can stop or question any member of the human rights organizations in Israel that actually believe that this declaration shouldn't have been made and that these organizations are legitimate. So it's again the political game, that they're trying to disregard all mentioning of the organizations, or trying to reach the basis of what happened, why were they declared like this, or really reaching the truth. Because in what they're doing is like an administrative detention. There is secret evidence, and now you have to prove that you didn't do anything that they say that you're doing regarding the secret evidence that they have. So again, that's what they're doing here. They're saying that these organizations are terrorist organizations. Why should the evidence should be kept secret? And why shouldn't people be arrested regarding direct terrorist activities or helping activity or terrorist organizations? So while this is not happening, they are saying that the ones that question this decision are being sympathizers. In this sense, you believe that you declared an organization as a terror organization. So bring the evidence, show us what your decision was based on, and act upon it. You cannot say in the one hand that they are terror organizations, and in the other hand, you cannot keep this evidence secret. So it doesn't make sense. For other organizations that they have been declared, they show the evidence, they show the linkage between terror acts and things like that, and that I guess that's the same in the United States, regarding Hezbollah or regarding other organizations. You show the linkage, you can make you have warrants for the arrest of the people involved in these organizations. You say people that that you shouldn't be, and you show the linkage between the declaration and the acts of the organization, but here they're not doing it. So that is questionable.
What do you think is you mentioned NGO Monitor may have been part of this effort to have organizations be classified this way. Do you have a sense of what you think the larger strategy is of people on the Israeli right? Is it to essentially shut down the kind of human rights NGO sector, both among Israelis and Palestinians? What do you feel like is the larger effort going for here?
I think that that there is an effort. I don't know how deep it goes, but there is an effort to try and shut down all either Israeli or Palestinian organizations that criticize the occupation and that bring forward evidence regarding the violations of human rights and why occupation is bad. And it has several things, because most of the people that want to shut down those organizations are the ones that want greater Israel. They want to, they want to continue with the occupation. They want more settlements. They want to maybe they are the ones that went forward with the Trump plan. So actually, those organizations, whether in Israel or in Palestine, are making their job or their dreams harder. So they, in a sense, they want to stop them. And one of the ways, whether in Israel or in Palestine, is to demonize those organizations. So in Israel, they were called traitors, the members of those organizations or the organizations themselves. And Palestinians, since they cannot be traitors, they become terrorists. But it's the same. It's the same mode of operation, and trying to bash and demonize people that are against occupation and are trying to show what occupation is like and what it does to the people living under occupation.
So our last question was, you are a member, you're in Meretz, you're a member of the Knesset. Meretz is a member of this coalition government. So what is it like to, how do you make sense of your party being in a coalition government that has taken this action that you strongly oppose?
You see, you don't have light, right? Something
I know that it's something about anyone, when I sit down for too long, my light goes off. So I'm gonna have to stand up and turn on. I'll give you a second to answer the question while I turn on the light.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Well, look, this government, I believe, is very important in one hand for the democracy in Israel. We've been for too long led by a person that is now being in trial for offenses that are part of the job that he held before as prime minister. And so a lot of the energy of that government was to destroy democratic organisms and democratic values in order to try to get free from that trial. So for Israeli democracy, this government is very important. And it is also unique in the sense that people from the very right wing and people from the left wing sat together for the first time, and we have an Arab party for the first time as part of the government, and people came here to work. So many years we didn't have a taktiv, a budget. So now in these days we're working very hard in order to pass the budget that we didn't have a country that didn't have a budget for so many years, and there are so many issues that were left without that were not dealt with. And not only that we have to give again the necessity of saying that the High Court is important and is not destroying Israel, and that all these organs of democracy are important for the country. So this is a very important country, a very important government. And but on the other hand, all of us, either right wing or left wing, we have problems, ideological problems with our partners, and we're trying to deal with them in a sense that this government decided that we're not going to annex territories, and in the other side, we're not going to end occupation. So we have to deal with the other things that are important for the citizens of Israel. Transportation, the cost of living, healthcare, and things like that. But on the other hand, what we have been seeing is that some of the acts of the right wing of this government and of the Minister of Defense is that they're creating a reality that in the end, the possibility of a two-state solution will not be possible in the ground. Building more housing units in the settlements, allowing illegal settlements in the ground without dismantling and things like that. Eventually, in the end, will not be possible to make a two-state solution. So when we're in this government, our task is again to stop that building or that settlers illegal settlements or settlers violence from inside the government. And as well, this decision by the Minister of Defense, some of the ministers from Meretz and the Labor Party have presented, well, not a complaint, but they asked a meeting with the Minister of Defense, and they want to see the evidence that's behind the declarations. And so I cannot say it's easy to manage this government, but I think it's still important, and it's important that these voices are being heard from inside the government and not only from the opposition.
And sorry, one more. Do you think that there's any possibility that Meretz would have the power inside the government to stop settlement growth? I mean, it just seems like we see a new announcements of settlement growth. You know, we've seen them over the last few months. I mean, is that really realistic that Meretz would be able to stop the settlement growth from a government led by Naftali Bennett, the former head of the Yesha Council?
Well, we have to understand that in another 2 years, the government will be led by Yair Lapid. So, it also means that, you know, the decision making of building house units, it's a long one. It's not, you know, from today until tomorrow. So I actually do believe that Meretz and our partners, we have leverage over the decisions not to really to build those housing units eventually in the ground. I'd be happier if those decisions wouldn't be passed from the beginning, but and there are a lot of Netanyahu's government before the end of its tenure passed a lot of decisions of building a lot of housing units in the occupied territories, which actually can start they can start being built like any time, and our task or one of our tasks is not to allow that to happen.
Thank you so much, Gaby, for sharing your time and your analysis on this really, really important subject. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Please make sure to check out the FMEP website, fmep.org. And please make sure you're subscribed to this podcast to stay up to date. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Spotify. And you can also watch these podcasts on YouTube. And with that, I'm Peter Beinart signing off for now. Take care, and thank you, Gaby, again.
Thank you.